Do you think that that's the case? Do you believe that this couple of press conferences over the last 3 or 4 days and the change in demeanour of Ruben Amorim is nothing to do with why he's been sacked?
No, I think it's just accelerated it. And there's an element of that with Chelsea and Maresca as well. I think it's not simply about results or performances. I think it's deeper than that. It's about...
Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. My name is Joe. We are joined today by football writer and friend of the channel, Henry Winter. Henry, it is a monumental day for Manchester United. A manager sacked. Ruben Amorim has left the building at Manchester United. There's loads to talk about. What's happened, how we've got to this point, your thoughts on it all. But just to start with, what was your initial reaction when you heard the news today?
Not complete surprise, particularly after his comments last night and his general mood in recent weeks, and particularly not surprised by the when you look at the football. And I mean, you can take it back right to the start, and the board and the footballing directors of football have got to take responsibility for this. If you appoint a manager who's obsessed with wing backs, who plays 3-4-2-1, and bring him into a club which is synonymous with a back four, with wingers, going back to George Best, obviously Ryan Giggs and Kanchelskis in more recent years, you've got to accept that either he changes, and anyone you speak to in Portugal before he arrives said, well, listen, he's very stubborn and he's not going to change, or you roll with it. But yeah, it's frustrating because he's clearly a likeable guy. There's obviously a talented coach there. We saw that at Sporting. But he just wasn't prepared to change. So I guess it was inevitable what happened earlier today.
I mean, it is a bizarre situation. I think there's always with any manager in any club, and especially at Man United, you're encouraged to kind of pin your colours to the mast early on. Do you Amorim in, Amorim out? Do you like him? Is he good enough? And you almost get extra points for predicting it as early as you possibly can and sticking with it. And if you were right, well done. And if you weren't, ha ha. But it does feel as though all the things you've mentioned there have led this to be a particularly divisive appointment right from the very start. There were things that didn't quite make sense. You know, we already saw sort of through the process of this new manager coming in, Dan Ashworth was allowed to leave Manchester United. He didn't fit the mould. He didn't work the way that they wanted him to. Then we go with Ruben Amorim almost as this kind of, this is what we've gone for. We know how he plays. We're going to go for it. And we've got rid of Dan Ashworth just to prove how sort of keen on Ruben Amorim we are almost. And then straight away, before he even arrived, as you mentioned, this 5 at the back situation. And just onto today's version of events, I'll get into the sort of party line in a minute and what United seem to be saying. How much of that lack of willingness to bend and lack of change do you think has led to this dismissal? I know you sort of hinted at it before then, but do you think that it does just come down to you aren't playing the Manchester United way and you're not willing to change, or do you think there's more going on here?
I mean, there's probably more going on. And remember, we do live in a very impatient world, not simply in football. We live in the age of social media, in, very responsible and measured and insightful fans channels like yours. But, go into the wild west of social media and it's different. And one thing I would absolutely say in all this is that Manchester United fans are actually different from the majority of other fans in this age that we live in terms of, going to Manchester United fans, your fans are unbelievably patient. I'm talking about the match-going fans, not the sort of slightly different mood on social media. The patience of Manchester United fans would not have been reflected in similar circumstances at other clubs. In terms of your support for the manager, well, he's a head coach, but in the position of manager, in the chair of manager, I think has just been absolutely admirable, given some of the nonsense that you've been served up. But coming back to your point about the Amorim, just the way he plays is not a Manchester United way. And you either just throw hundreds, probably £1 billion and more, and change the whole squad, or if you're a sensible manager, you actually sort of adapt yourself as well as adapt the team. But Manchester United aren't about wing backs. Manchester United about wingers. Manchester United are also about youth. And I don't think the Kobbie Mainoo narrative particularly helped him, and the way Amorim handled this. We can debate about what's happened to Kobbie Mainoo's form, but I was there at the European Championship final when he started for England. Whatever you think about England, he is still starting against the best team in the world, against Spain. So absolutely, that's the whole sort of ignoring of youth. I know the Fletcher boys and Shea Lacey have come in more recently and been given a chance. And Aidan Haven, I know he came from Arsenal, but he's been a sort of a bright spark for you recently. Maybe there's been a belated recognition of that by Amorim. But Manchester and people say, well, you have to change from your club's identity. Well, I don't think you really do. I think if you look at Manchester United, you are about wingers. You are about a defiant defence. You are about playing for the shirt. And I think this is a slightly a Glazer argument, or an argument against the Glazers, and I've been banging on against them since they took over the FA effectively in 2005. This is a cultural issue at Manchester United, which is antithetical to what Manchester United should be about, but which is part of the Glazer era. And I don't need to tell you as Manchester United fans this, but the whole ethos of the Glazers is what you can take out. And the ethos, I always thought, and I grew up thinking about Manchester United, although I'm not a United fan, is Manchester United is all about what you can put in. It's all about the Busby babes. It's all about Busby. It's all about the players, 70s, Robson. It's all about Sir Alex Ferguson. It's all about the class of 92. It's all about Roy Keane getting booked, but still driving the team on to the final. That selflessness. And I think that culture disappeared, or certainly was eroded when the Glazers came in, because the Glazers are all about themselves, about taking out. And I think that culture then changed. And Manchester United have need to fight against that. And I think it's a question of leadership, whether it's on the board, whether it's a question of leadership in the dugout, which I don't think Amorim showed enough of. He never spoke with the authority of a Manchester United manager. I was thinking, I admire the people who are on the comms side at Manchester United. They're really good professionals. But I would love to have sat down, as I'm sure you guys would, and actually spoken to Amorim and said, you are manager or head coach of Manchester United. Understand the privilege. Understand the sort of, the great steps that you are stepping into, of the individuals who've gone before you, and actually act with pride, talk up the team. Don't say, this is some of the worst players I've worked with, or whatever sort of statements he came out with. Be more measured and be more authoritative in your pronunciations or public comments. But I also think, I quite like the German way, where you do have an element of responsibility, and the sporting directors do come out and address issues, whether it's direction of travel for the club, whether it's structural issues, transfers, whatever. I do quite like that. And personally, I was tweeting about it overnight, I think that Ruben Amorim talks too much and Jason Wilcox talks too little. And I think you, the fans, because it's your club, it's not their club, it's your club. You're there through thick and thin. You deserve more explanation and accountability from the club.
I think that's a great point on the accountability front. We've seen Jason Wilcox and some of the other higher ups at United happy to talk and do interviews, especially when things were going a little bit better after those 3 wins in a row earlier in the season, and Manager of the Month and Player of the Month in October. And I think it is important and imperative, really, that they come out and explain a little bit about what's going on here, because I think that we, as United fans, my worry now is that the course that they had put the club on, because obviously the Glazers are still there and they're still majority owners and all of that, but it feels as though the running of the club had been handed over to INEOS and the people that they've brought in. And there was maybe a hope more than an expectation or any proof, but that things would be done differently, and that United would have a plan that would persist across players and managers, and that we would have an identity that they would be sort of keeping track of. And all that sort of jumps into question now. It jumped into question a little bit, as you said, when we hired a manager with slightly different principles, but I feel as though, as fans, we could see why eventually that might work, that might be okay. In fact, if anything, maybe wing-backs could become extra wingers, and maybe it's more attacking and we become more excited. You sort of talk yourself into all this stuff. But now we've changed 2 managers in 2 seasons halfway through, in back-to-back seasons. That doesn't scream to me consistency and vision and an unwavering idea of what Manchester United is supposed to be. I really think they need to come out and tell us why this makes sense across the plan that they had for Manchester United when they first came in, this sort of Project 150 and winning the league in 2028. How does sacking 2 managers halfway through a season in a row align with that vision? Just in terms of what INEOS and the club have said, not directly, but it seems to have been put out to the media that supposedly this isn't to do with any recent sort of bust-ups or changes in Amorim and Wilcox's sort of relationship. This is Manchester United are not going to be on course for the sort of on-field targets of this season. We haven't seen the improvements on the pitch. Do you think that that's the case? Do you believe that this couple of press conferences over the last 3 or 4 days and the change in demeanour of Ruben Amorim is nothing to do with why he's been sacked?
No, I think it's just accelerated it. And there's an element of that with Chelsea and Maresca as well. I think it's not simply about results or performances. I think it's deeper than that. It's about structural issue, and this is not simply a Manchester United issue. I think you're seeing managers, some of whom have had good playing careers, looking upstairs and thinking, actually, I'm not saying that's necessarily the case in terms of the narrative between Amorim and Wilcox, but I'm sure there's an element of them thinking, well, hang on a sec, who are you to sort of tell me who I should recruit, particularly if you've said, right, we're backing the 3-4-3 manager and that's why you've been appointed. And I think there's an element that they look at that and they think, well, hang on a sec. And this comes down to the fact that managers nowadays, we have to scrap the word manager. Sir Alex Ferguson was a manager. He managed the club. Nothing happened at Manchester United without Sir Alex knowing about it. Different era, different media, different culture amongst players. But managers nowadays have to realise they are head coaches and focus on that. And that's why I think that the Wilcoxes and Baradas have to sort of be more accountable and talk more. And just while we're on accountability, Manchester United, you've got some fine players. I mean, I like Matthias de Ligt. I know he's been injured. I like Aidan Haven. He's a young player who's coming through. I love Mateus Cunha. And I like Brian Mbeumo. I know he's away at the moment. Casemiro, fantastic 3-4 years ago. Bruno Fernandes, fantastic. He's your best player. He's also your captain. He's not a captain. Harry Maguire is a leader. Bruno Fernandes is not an individual you necessarily look at in adversity and think, that's a natural captain. He's not a Robson. He's not a Keane. He's not a Gary Neville. There isn't that element of pure defiance to him. So, yeah, I mean, that's, I think taking your point, it's more than results. It's about leadership. It's a cultural issue, and that's something that's got to be addressed. And the most important thing is that people got to realise this is Manchester United. Anyone associated with Manchester United, particularly those who get paid, they have to give more.
In terms of this leadership and the setup here, then obviously Jason Wilcox's name has been mentioned so much in the last few days. I think Amorim mentioned sort of sporting director as a specific title that he sort of called out about, I'll do my job, you need to do your job. It seems as though there's been some disagreement over potentially transfers this January. I think Amorim a couple of weeks ago he was asked about it and hinted that there could be some business done. Then up until, or sort of as of maybe a week or so ago, the opposite seemed to be true. Now they're not getting anyone in January. Semenyo's chosen City. The Belabour approach that potentially may have happened was sort of quashed pretty quickly as well. Do you think that there should be some concern about Wilcox and INEOS and Barada, that we have sacked 2 managers in back-to-back seasons? Whether it's the right decision or not in the moment, this clearly isn't the plan that they had laid out 18 months ago when they kept Ten Hag after interviewing other people behind his back and then sacked him 3 months later. Do you think there should be genuine concerns raised about how they're running the club at the moment?
Absolutely. I mean, yesterday was the 4th. Amorim was the 4th manager that you've had in the most recent 4 trips to Ellen Road. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Erik Ten Hag, and remind me who the other one was in there as well.
Van Nistelrooy potentially?
Van Nistelrooy was in there as well. So, yeah, 4 managers in 4 trips to Manchester United. I thought there was one other. So when you go there next, it will be 5 different managers in 5 trips to Ellen Road since 2001. And that is not simply down to individual flaws of the manager, although 1 or 2 of them clearly had issues, as we've highlighted with Amorim. That's clearly an issue upstairs at the club as well. I mean, the irony in all this is that I covered Jason Wilcox's career, and he was a winger. I mean, what is Manchester? Look at it. You were saying that you were trying to get your head around it and sort of believe your way into sort of the fact that it will work with wing backs. You are Manchester United. Wing backs. The phrase should be banned.
It's all just so stressful. I mean, I didn't expect this today. I think we all could see that this might not carry on until next season, and then you have, Jim Ratcliffe talking a couple of months ago about how we're looking at this as a 2 or 3 year project, not just this season. Is he going to get sacked? That seemed to sort of satisfy a lot of people that whether you like it or not, Amorim's going to be here at least till the end of this season. Now that's changed, and things look like we're sort of back to square one almost. In terms of potential candidates, we've got Darren Fletcher for the interim. I don't know whether that's 100% to the end of the season, or we'll see on that front. Is there anyone to you that seems as though they could be a good candidate for Manchester United? We hear names like Gareth Southgate mentioned. I think a lot of people recoil at that, especially with his sort of football league record rather than international record not really being of the requisite standard. Who do you think feels as though they could be a Manchester United manager?
Fletcher until the end of the season. I think Fletcher will bring in wingers. He'll calm everything down. He's respected by the media. He understands the culture of the club. I think the nature of Darren as an individual, that he is someone who gives. He's not someone who instinctively takes. And I think that's what Manchester United need at the moment. And also, if you look at the market at the moment, or you look at the availability, I mean, it's not flooded with sort of elite managers sort of sitting on riverbanks with their fishing rods waiting for their agent to ring and tell them that, there's this fabulous opportunity. I mean, I guess Xavi possibly, but I think if Germany have a good World Cup, I think maybe if there's a release clause for Nagelsmann, I think that might be next year. I think he's contracted to the Euros. I think someone like him, but you've got to wait until the summer, and particularly World Cup and tournament summers. Generally, there tends to be more fluid. Contracts come to an end. Managers don't do very well. I can remember one World Cup where 6 of the 8 quarter-final managers actually left. So it's a more fluid world. Whether you necessarily want an international manager, but if a Carlo Ancelotti came back on the scene, if it didn't work out with Brazil. But I think at the moment what everyone needs is to calm down, not the fans, because I think you've been absolutely brilliant, because it will be chaos at some other clubs in terms of protests, given what nonsense you've had thrown at you. But I think there needs to be some more accountability from Barada, from those upstairs, coming out, talking positively, saying that, look, this great club is in good hands, and they've got to prove that, because clearly they haven't so far. And put Darren, or maybe assisted by Michael Carrick. I'm obviously biased, having helped him write his book, but I know what a good manager is. You need people who care, and that's one of the issues I had, one of the many issues I had with Ruben Amorim when he started having a go at, well, not really having a go, but sort of highlighting the pressure that was almost generated by former players. Gary Neville, Paul Scholes and Roy Keane have got every right to talk about Manchester United, because it's a club they love, particularly in Gary Neville's case. And so they talk a lot of sense. They talk with insight. They talk with passion. They talk, and maybe it's difficult for the current generation to hear the words from those three. And even if you ignore the content of what they're saying, the fact that those three, they stood for what Manchester United should be about. They stood for high standards, and they expect high standards, and Manchester United have slipped below that. You've got a week to prepare for games, and you're still not delivering. You're not in Europe. That's an affront to Manchester United's history. And I think that Gary Neville, Roy Keane and Paul Scholes and others are just examples of what Manchester United should be aspiring to. And anyone who goes into that dressing room, and look, we don't know, the sort of pressures and the human pressures of what Amorim and the others when by being involved with Manchester United. But still, you should be inspired by Gary Neville. You should listen to Gary Neville and Roy Keane and Paul Scholes. You might have issues with them over individual things that they've said, tactical, whatever. But actually, they represent what Manchester United should be about. And Manchester United need to get back to that. They need to get back to a back four, back to wingers, Darren Fletcher. This is not back to basics. This is just what Manchester United should be about, and what a lot of teams are about. Let's have a little bit of width. Let's have a little bit more front foot football, pressing, defiance, playing for the shirt, and being about the club, not simply about yourself.
Just finally then, do you think this was the right decision, whether it was the right time or not? I mean, it sounds as though you don't see Amorim as the right man for Manchester United.
I mean, I was hoping he would do well, but the more you looked at 3-4-3, the more you heard. I mean, I did the media training for the pro license of some Portuguese coaches last year, and we were just talking about Amorim, who they obviously knew well from Lisbon, and they were just saying, well, he's not going to change. And I thought, that is a pity, because if he'd gone in there and there'd been this progressive, fresh, exciting young manager with 40 at the time, playing, and just sort of harnessing some of Manchester United's great strengths, then I thought, well, maybe that's good for the future. But it didn't work out that way. But I don't think any of us really know the sort of pressure of being Manchester United manager. And I mean, he did look like he was aging. He did look like he was aging a bit. So look, I wish Darren Fletcher huge luck. He's a good guy, and he'll have the right intentions, and he'll understand what Manchester United are about. And I don't think Ruben Amorim did.
What a day. Too many of these days over the last few years. Another Manchester United manager sacked. But Henry, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts on the situation as well. Make sure you go and check out Henry over on social media. We'll put the links to his socials over there as well, and on Sports Illustrated. Henry Winter, thank you very much for coming on.
Pleasure. Good luck.
Thank you.